Okay, welcome to this event. This is My Plan is Signed. Now what? This is a comprehensive look at all the things that you should do after your estate planning documents are signed. I am Taylor Casper. Thank you for joining me. And I just want to start right off the bat with why you're here. Like, why are you here? What are we doing? And as some of you might know, I spend a lot of time giving my past clients phone calls and just kind of checking in to see how things are going and if anything has changed since the estate plan has been put into place, and just making sure that all of those last things, those final items to check off the list, are in fact complete and done. So a lot of you have gotten calls from me, and what I have found out pretty overwhelmingly is that for many of you, we have some, and this is like not a slight, this is just why I'm here to help. But for many of you, your assets, for many of you that have a trust, your assets have not been funded into the trust. You have not, whether you have a trust or have a will-based plan, your beneficiary designations haven't been checked since you completed your estate plan. So we don't know who the beneficiaries are on some of the assets, or I have let you know that the beneficiaries need to be changed and updated on some of your assets to either add the trust as the primary beneficiary, or to remove some of you ex-spouses, or to remove, like when you had put, your oldest child or something on there with the intention that that child would then go ahead and like distribute all of the assets to your other children, beneficiaries, and heirs. And I've instructed you that you need to go back and look at your beneficiary designations. You need to update and change those. And that hasn't been done yet. So I've been finding that out from quite a few people. I've also uncovered that quite a few people have not yet put their healthcare directive into their medical chart at their doctor's office, or at their just in their primary care physician system, in their My Chart on your online logins, that you can like go ahead and upload that. That hasn't been done. And then for some of you, I served you a very long time ago, 3 or maybe even 5 years ago. And even though we offer a free hour to hour and a half plan review, where we will sit with you and go through your plan every 3 years, make sure it still makes sense, make sure you understand what it says. Some of you we served way back in like 2018, 19, and you have not opened your binder or looked at your plan since that time. So that's why we're here, to rectify some of those things for you. Now, I know you're thinking like, my documents are signed, I'm good, it's all great, like, so what? And I want to just let you know why this matters, why all the things that I just mentioned to you, why they matter. And I want to talk to you about a husband and wife that I served back in 2021, and they were in their 50s. They came in to do their estate planning, like so many of you did, because they hadn't done it yet, and they wanted to make sure that all of their ducks were in a row. But they had kind of an urgency to their estate planning because the husband actually had been diagnosed with cancer. So they wanted to make sure that everything was aligned in the event that he got sicker, or even maybe ultimately passed away. And so the prognosis really wasn't good. So they were really preparing for the fact that he might pass in the near future. So of course we get them in right away. We get them all squared away with their meetings, their appointments. We get their documents drafted. They are approved by the clients and signed. And I kind of sent them off with instructions to take some next steps. I even offered to have kind of a phone appointment. I don't think we were doing Zoom appointments as much at that time, even though that was post-COVID, but we had, appointments that were, we got to get these assets moved over into the trust. We got to look at these beneficiary designations. We got to make sure that the house is titled to both spouses, or that it gets into the trust, right? And so we had this appointment set, and for whatever reason, the clients weren't able to keep the appointment. And in short order thereafter, the husband passed away. they aren't terribly unique, and that I have a lot of people come to me because that has happened. They've had a plan done and the assets weren't transferred, or, the person passed away before they were able to finalize those things. A few of my clients have died since I've been in practice over the last 6 years. And so it happens, right? So it happened. So they really didn't know what they had done and what they hadn't done. So he dies, and it turns out that there's like a brokerage account or some sort of investment account. And then there was also a retirement account, and neither of those had beneficiaries on them. Well, even though the spouse was like the next of kin or the person who had legal authority to inherit these accounts, because she wasn't listed on those accounts, these brokerages and retirement plans would not pay out to her, quite unfortunately. So we had to figure out, one, how much was in the account so we could figure out what proceeding needed to happen. But essentially they had to have a court proceeding and go through like a probate style proceeding to adjudicate the accounts, the property of the wife. And that's, I'm sure, probably not what the husband would have wanted, especially since they did come in to work with me to work on their estate plan. So we're just here because I'm not really super excited about letting that outcome be your outcome. And I want to make sure that during this webinar, you understand why we're doing what we're doing and how you can make sure that your assets are aligned with the entirety of the plan so that your family will have the right outcomes. And you're going to obviously have a lot of peace of mind once you make sure that this is complete. So let's get started. I'm going to go through a little roadmap with you about what we're going to do here in this event. So in this webinar this evening, over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to make sure that you know exactly what else you need to do after your plan documents are signed. So we're going to go through 4 main parts to this presentation. Number 1, we're going to go over trust funding and beneficiary designation do's and don'ts. Then we're going to move to secret agent training, which is teaching you for your fiduciaries what they need to know and what they need to do to make sure that your plan is executed successfully. We're also going to talk about in sickness and in death to make a plan for incapacity and final rest. And lastly, I'm going to clue you in on how to know when you should be looking at updating your plan. So make sure you buckle up. This is going to go fast, and make sure you stay to the end, and also that you take good notes along the way. Okay, here we are. We're at trust funding and beneficiary do's and don'ts. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of the presentation here, I want to just back up a little bit and ask you a question. Do you remember when you met with me? Probably we got on the phone together, or you may have come into the office depending upon when we met. We might have met on Zoom, but we got together and I asked you lots and lots of questions. Or maybe I made you fill out a questionnaire or give me copies of all of your statements and all of your assets. I might have even given you a document and item locator and made you do a spreadsheet. Why? Why would I do that? Well, there are 2 big reasons. The first is this: we cannot distribute and direct assets to your beneficiaries, heirs, and the people that you want to inherit if we can't find them. If I don't know about the brokerage account and the retirement account and that parcel of land in southern Minnesota, I can't make sure that they get to who you want them to get to. The other thing is we can't begin to inform you on what it is that you should be doing with your planning and what's going to work for you if I don't know what it is that you have. And what's more, you might have goals, dreams, and desires for your plan, like paying for college or making sure your spouse would have, plenty of money to be well taken care of or even pay off the house if something happened to you. And that might be your goal and your dream and your desire, but you don't have any money available to fund these goals, dreams, and desires and to make these things that you want a reality in your plan. And so we need to be able to advise you on that so that we can fill in any gaps that might be there and make sure you have a really rounded out picture of your assets in your plan. So in this webinar, we're going to tackle both of those things. And I want you during this time to kind of be calling out all the things that you own, right? Be writing them down somewhere, make sure you've listed them somewhere, make sure that you have filled out any fillables that I've created for or given to you that are spots where you can detail your assets and everything that you own. And that includes things that you own, so your assets, your income, and your debts. Because if you become incapacitated, or when you die, because we will all die, myself included, we have to be able to act really smoothly, right, on some of these things that aren't just going to go away. Okay, so I want to just kind of clue you into why this is so important. And if some of you might know that my aunt died pretty tragically and unexpectedly in August of 2023. We continue to grieve and mourn this. It was a very difficult time. And we know that she had an estate plan because I drafted it for her in 2020. But she was a very private person. So while I drafted her plan and we did a transfer on death deed for her and all of those things, she was not very open and forthcoming with me about like what bills she was paying, what her asset structure was, and all of those things. So when she died, we really didn't have any idea, one, about the bills. So I knew she had a mortgage, but we didn't really know like how much is on the mortgage, who is the mortgage servicer, who's being paid, what's the monthly payment, is it going out on auto pay, do we need to write a check for this? So we didn't have any idea about that. We also didn't have any idea about things that aren't crucial and critical to continue paying, right? Because a mortgage is crucial and critical to continue paying. A car note, crucial and critical to continue paying. If we live in the Minnesota winters, keeping the pipes on, right, with the heating and the utilities, crucial and critical items. There are a lot of crucial, not crucial, and not critical items that you might be paying for that we would like to turn off so they don't continue to auto debit and bleed money out of the estate, right? Like your Audible subscription, we can probably turn off. Your Netflix, your cable, your trash service can probably turn some of that stuff off. And so it would be nice to be able to turn that off so we don't have months and months and months of these things coming out on auto debit and we don't know how to stop them or what they are. So that's something we experienced when my aunt passed away. So what ended up happening in reality is that I ended up driving to her house like multiple times. The week after she passed, the next week, the following week. My mom went and did a big run to get the mail, and we had to get the mail and sort through all of the mail and figure out, okay, like, what are we doing? Are we writing checks to these places? Are we turning things off? Because it was like a full 30 to 45 day cycle before we could get all the answers on everything financially that needed to either be upkept or turned off. And we were lucky because she was like old school, so she paid all of her bills and her stuff by check. And so she'd write a check for the stuff. So all the bills were coming in paper and nothing was auto debiting. So we were able to like pay what we wanted, call and notify, and turned off what we didn't. But for other people, I know I have had historically a lot of things on auto pay. So how do you figure that out? I have everything on auto pay. I get all my e-statements to my email. If you don't have my Face ID, my fingerprint, my login, you might just be out of luck. And so then the reality for that situation is you have to go to the courts, get a court order saying that you're the special administrator, the executor, the personal representative, a horse by, any color, basically, so that you can take that order and you can send it with a death certificate to companies that you think the person is paying and say, hey, I think this person has an account here. Can you let me know? And by the way, I need to turn it off or I need a statement or whatever. And that's probably, it's disastrous. It's incredibly time consuming. And that's probably not what you want your family and friends and loved ones to be doing when they would prefer to be grieving that you're gone. So I just say that to call out how important it is to just do this work of detailing and listing as much information as is humanly possible for your loved ones, your personal representatives, your attorneys in fact, your healthcare agents, and all of those people that are involved. So along with this webinar, I've created like a doc pack for you or a document stack for you. And in there, if you've already kind of looked through it, you'll notice that there's a fillable PDF that gives you the space to go ahead and type in the assets that you own, your employer, because if you get sick, if you die, more if you get sick, right? We need to notify your boss. If you die, we need to know what benefits, like do you have PTO that should be paid out and due and coming back to the estate? So it gives you space to write out all that stuff, your employer, your income, your old work benefits, your assets, your, I already said income, your debts, your monthly bills, your utilities, all of those things are really, really important for people to know. All right. So a few main asset types that we're going to talk about. So I went over like what we're talking about, why it's important. Let me talk about the how. And a few main asset types we're going to talk about for our trust funding how and our beneficiary designation how are insurance and annuities, investments, retirement accounts, bank accounts, and personal property. So here's the how of the trust funding piece that we're going to talk about here right now. Insurance and annuities. These are these need, I should say, like one of two things. If your kids are minors or if you have a blended family situation, you need to update your beneficiary designations on your insurance and your annuities. I would say also your investment accounts because those have beneficiary designations. And if you have a trust, you want to name your trust as the primary beneficiary of those assets and accounts. Okay. I would say the secondary beneficiary would then be probably your spouse. And if you have no spouse, then your children. Just understand if you terminate your trust for some reason and you've named your spouse or your children, whoever is named is the 100% owner of that asset upon its disposition, once it gets passed out and distributed. Okay, so you can't name your spouse and then, oh, well, my spouse would give my other adult children from a previous relationship money because she's super fair. No, now it's her money. So she might have a tax. One, she could just keep it if she wanted to. And then two, even if she wanted to transfer it, she may have a taxable event for exceeding the state gift tax and federal gift tax limitations. So if you take nothing away, this is going to do big stuff for your estate. Insurance, annuities, and investments. Primary beneficiary, make it your trust, especially if you have blended family or if you have minor children as who may be your beneficiaries of your estate. If you have a will-based plan, we have several clients who have opted to do a will that has a testamentary trust. What that is a will that would create a trust upon your death, but it has to first pass through the probate court. It's a little less expensive than doing the trust right off the bat. So we've had people do it and kind of take that stance that, I hope I just live past my kids being 18 and then the provisions that would create the trust would be null and void. That's their choice. That's anybody's choice. They've done that and that's what they have. So if that is you and you have a will-based plan with a testamentary trust or a plan that creates a trust after you die, you want to name your estate of John Doe as the beneficiary on your insurance, annuity, and investment accounts. Okay, retirement accounts. These also have beneficiary designations. So as like a general rule of thumb here, because your spouse has certain tax benefits or could have certain tax benefits depending on the type of retirement account, as a general rule of thumb, if you are in a marriage situation where all of your children are in common, name your spouse first. If all of your children aren't in common, but you have no qualms with your spouse getting all of your retirement, name your spouse first. If you have minor children as the beneficiaries, or if you have like a split going on between your current spouse and your children, then I would say name your trust as the beneficiary on the accounts. If you have questions about that because you have some niche situation, then I would encourage you to make an appointment after this webinar. All right, bank accounts. These are a little bit harder because you can't just get on the internet and pull up your account and change the beneficiaries over or fill out a form and fax or mail the form in like you can for investments, annuities, insurances, retirement accounts. Most of that stuff you can either do on the internet, you can email your financial advisor, right? All of those things. Bank accounts are slightly harder because you do need to actually go into the bank. If you and your spouse are joint on a bank account, then you both have to be present at the bank in order to make the changes that I'm about to tell you to make. What you should do with your bank accounts is one of two things. You have an option here. If you have a bank account, the first option, which everybody does, I don't know why I said if, but on your bank account, the first option is going to be to create a pay on death clause on your bank account, and then you would name your trust as the beneficiary of the bank account. That's option number one. Option number two is you could make your trust the owner of your bank account. They have a really similar outcome because for either one, we kind of need the death certificate to move forward without you anyways. So the outcome's really similar. For a lot of clients, the decision-making framework has been, if I make the trust the owner of the bank account, then I have to open a brand new account. Some people don't want to do that. So, because then you have to like change all your logins and change if you're auto debiting stuff because it's a checking account, or if you're doing auto transfers and from your checking to your savings or savings to your investments or whatever, sometimes it can be a pain. So that's been the decision-making framework for a lot of our clients. So it's up to you. You can do a pay on death and make the trust the beneficiary of the bank account, or you can make the trust an owner. Now, neither of these situations should have anything I'm telling you should create any sort of taxable event at the time that you name the trust. Because the trust during your lifetime, it's a revocable living trust. So during your lifetime, the tax ID is your social security number. So we didn't have to create a new tax ID. We don't have to file new tax returns. It's just common practice that it continues to roll on as though it's owned by you. You and the trust are like this really synonymous entity. It's almost like when you're a sole proprietor in business. So very similar there. All right, moving on. Personal property. How do we deal with personal property to make sure it's trust funded or it's a beneficiary or has a beneficiary or whatever? And personal property is everything that's not cash, or cash equivalents like bank accounts, coin collections, and real property. So like your house or a parcel of land. So that's your boats, your mobile homes and RVs, your toys, cars, and the stuff inside of your house are personal property. We can do a few things for larger assets that are governed by the DMV. So expensive cars, collector cars, maybe not your daily driver, but you can put your daily driver into a trust or give it to your estate. But expensive cars, classic cars, RVs, mobile homes, motor homes, and boats, things of that nature, you can actually go ahead and use this amazing tool called this form that I've provided to you from the DMV, and you can actually make that item pay on death to your trust. So then to the extent that that item would have triggered a probate, because that item is more than $75,000, and I know some of you who have been clients of us have assets like that are far in excess of $75,000. Some of you have $70,000 boats and RVs and Four Winds and like whatever, classic cars. We have some individuals who have those. This is a good way to make sure that we don't have a probate, because we can't change title of that one asset because the value of it is over $75,000. So that is the how of trust funding and what to do with your beneficiary designations. And I think one of the things that I may have neglected to say is the don't. And here's the don't. Don't, under any circumstance, do these two things. Don't name your minor children as a beneficiary on any of these accounts. You will trigger a court proceeding that you do not want. If your minor child is the beneficiary of your 401k, your bank account, your retirement accounts, your new whatever it is, if they are the beneficiary, in practice, here is what happens. Okay, you die. We write a letter, fill out the claim form to the Voya account or the life insurance account, and it asks for little Johnny's date of birth, and little Johnny's 12. Voya will come back and say, I'm sorry, we cannot release funds to little Johnny. He's not of a legal age. Go to the court and get a guardianship or conservatorship over little Johnny, and then we will release the funds to the guardian or conservator. So then you'll have to go to court, get this guardian or conservatorship, and in order to release these funds, and then if it's a guardian or conservator, like through the courts, what they have to do is every year they have to file a personal well-being report with the court, and they also have to file an annual accounting, and they have to pay a bond. So if little Johnny inherits $100,000 and there's a bond of 1%, the percentage depends on the credit and the worthiness of the guardian or conservator. So let's say it's 1%, it could be 3%. Then, the conservator of little Johnny will have to go find a bond company and pay the bond company $1,000 to secure against them stealing the money in the future. And again, the bond could be much higher, right? It could be $3,000. And that bond money actually comes out of little Johnny's money. So it's like this double dipping, right? Like any attorney's fees would come out of little Johnny's money. The bond premiums come out of little Johnny's money, and those get paid every year till little Johnny's 18. So what if you have a 3% bond on $100,000 for 6 years? $18,000 gets paid in bonds, or a little bit less, because the first year it'll be $3,000, and then the next year, there'll be $97,000. So then it'll be reduced a little bit year over year. But that's where the money goes. It comes from little Johnny's estate and goes to a bond company or a bond premium company because you named a minor on the account. Don't want to pay a bond? We can do a different proceeding where we put it in a restricted account, but nobody can access any of that money until little Johnny turns 18. So it can't be used for his maintenance, his upkeep, or anything like that. It just all waits till he turns 18. And in either scenario, the conservator with the bond or the restricted proceeding with no bond, when little Johnny turns 18, whatever's left is just his property outright from there. So there's no ongoing management of that or anything like that. So do not name minor children as beneficiaries of your accounts. The other thing, do not name third parties with the intention, and I touched on this a little bit, that they'll get the money to your kids. So don't name your mom as the beneficiary of your life insurance, because your mom's going to make sure and be fair and use it on the kids. If your mom makes gifts outright to somebody, or if you name your sister and she's going to spread it out amongst your siblings, and she makes gifts and those gifts are more than $16,000 in a calendar year, guess what? You guys are paying taxes on that. Your sister and the siblings are paying taxes on that. So don't do that either. Do it my way, and make sure that you have the outcome that you want and deserve. All right, let's talk a little word about curing shortfalls here, which we talked about before. I said, the reason it's so important to detail your assets, like one of the reasons, of course, is to make sure we can find the stuff when we need to pass it out. The second reason is for you. It's for you to understand what you have, for you to understand that if you want to pay for college for the kids, if you're gone, you better get moving, right? Because not everybody has that money already ready and set aside. And if, I died in the next I could pay for it because I have lots and lots of life insurance, but, some of us on the line here, some of us watching this webinar, if you died, you wouldn't have the funds available to pay for all of the things that you said you want to pay for your kids, and, to compensate your trustees and to make this gift and that gift and so on and so forth. So it's important that you know what you have in your estate so you can really take the blinders off and not emotionally, but rationally look at what your estate is really comprised of, so that then you would be able to just go ahead and cure those shortfalls by maybe you need to take an investment approach. Maybe you need to get serious about finally paying off your debt. Or maybe the easiest, quickest, cheapest way to do it right now, so that if something happened in the next 6 months to a year, they'd at least be somewhat covered, is to go out and get insurance. So get some life insurance, get some disability insurance, to make sure that things would be covered if something happened in the interim to you. I'll get off my insurance soapbox. I don't sell the stuff, but I could totally make you a referral to anybody if you needed me to. But there's how we cure shortfalls. And that's it. That's it for trust funding and beneficiary designations, do's and don'ts. Let's move on now to secret agent training. This is crucially important. This is about teaching your fiduciaries what to do. And you can't teach your fiduciaries what to do if you don't know what a fiduciary is and you don't know what your fiduciaries are going to do. So plans fail, one, for lack of funding, the thing we were just talking about. They also fail because your agents will screw things up. Let's just call a spade a spade. So instead of crossing our fingers and praying, let's take a moment here to just simply notify our agents, or make a plan about how we're going to notify our agents that they've been appointed as agents, and then teach them exactly what to look for and what they need to do to be successful in their roles. So I'm going to walk you through the most common types of agents and give you some instructions and directions on what to tell them and how to teach them how to help you. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit why having a good agent is so incredibly crucial. Let me just tell you a story about like a real deal. Okay. So this really happened. I ended up representing the new trustee of this trust, right? So like, let's say mama and papa make a trust and their son is the sole beneficiary of this trust and is named as the trustee. Mama and papa die. Son, as trustee, never really takes any affirmative action to wrap anything up. So he does go out and he does like one tax return, because you have to file a tax return for a person in the year that they die. So he does one tax return, he gets a certificate of trust, does one trust tax return, and then he adds himself to these like investment accounts and bank accounts in his own personhood. I don't even know how he did some of this stuff, honestly. I'm like, you can do that. That's like not legal. Adds himself to some, doesn't do anything to others, and starts, just drawing on the money and spending the money because he's the sole beneficiary. So he's entitled to it. It's for him, but he never actually like wraps up the trust because he doesn't really know what he is doing. Him and his wife go on another 7 years like that and he dies. So now we still have this trust and all these assets, and they should have gone to the son, and then the wife would have inherited them. Well, son never wrapped up the trust, never made a distribution to himself, dies. His wife isn't the successor trustee. It's son's cousin, many states away, who I happen to end up dealing with, right? So there's a clause in the trust, and it says, if he dies before everything's distributed, which he did, now there's like this 5-way distribution. Wife's mad, and trustee, who is not a professional and agreed to do it somewhat begrudgingly, ends up with this mess and then of course she did the smart thing and hired an attorney and we're working it out. But because of son being a bad trustee and a bad fiduciary, wife misses out, and now new trustee is filing like 6 years of tax returns because he never took the assets out of trust. So the interest is taxed at the trust's tax rate, right? So 6 years of tax returns. There's a storage unit that somebody's been paying it. We tallied it up. It was like $30,000 over the years to pay for this storage unit. Nothing's in there but junk. It's bad, right? Their bank accounts that is sheeted to the state of Minnesota, and all of this because he just didn't take any action as the trustee. We don't want that to be your story. So this is why, and I could tell you stories about healthcare agents who acted poorly and attorneys, in fact, who acted poorly and all the things. But you should get the point that this is why we, one, want to pick the right people, and two, we want to make sure they're educated about what it is that they need to do in order to stand in your shoes as your fiduciary and act on your behalf as your agent. So let's go through the 4 main types of fiduciaries, secret agents, as I like to call them, or special agents, but they are your agents and they're going to take care of you. The first one is a healthcare agent. This should literally be the easiest one. This should be the easiest one for me to explain to you and for you to go out and tell your healthcare agent about. So first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to have your healthcare directive put on file with your doctor's office and as many healthcare providers as you already have right now as humanly possible. So if you have a women's care doctor and you have a primary care provider and you have an oncologist and you have a hematologist and you have like all these things or whatever, and you have a psychiatrist, like take that healthcare directive and put it on file at all of those places, especially if they're not in the same health system. If they're different health systems, it's even more crucial that you get this put on file. Then you're either going to share a copy with your agent, which I do recommend, or you can keep it for yourself and tell your agent where to find it. Now, your healthcare agent, here's all they need to know. All they need to know is that you have created this document. In it, you've said at least something about how you want yourself and your body treated if you become incapacitated and what you want to happen to you. And it's their job to consent to treatment for you, decline treatment for you, and figure out if you have to go into a care like a hospital, a long-term care facility, a rehab facility, whatever. It's their job to decide which one it is. That's what they do. That's it. They have the most concise job. I mean, now they could end up like doing a lot of things and having a lot of work cut out for them if you have a lot of major health issues, but they're confined to that arena. They make decisions about your health and where you live. That's what they do. Attorney-in-fact is another agent who is the person that acts while you're living but incapacitated, like your healthcare agent. Attorney-in-fact is actually the name for the person who's named under the power of attorney document. A lot of people say, oh, my power of attorney. The correct term is my attorney-in-fact, but we all know what you're talking about if you call them a power of attorney. They are empowered to act during your lifetime on your behalf to manage finances if you can't, or if you can, but you just choose to have them act because you want the assistance. You want somebody who can run off and sign things for you, or if you go out of town, would be able to take care of things for you, or if you don't drive anymore. This is what your healthcare agent is for. Okay. What your healthcare agent needs to know. They need to know that you have a power of attorney document. They need to know that they're named. They need to know where to locate the document if something happens to you. And they need access to several things. They need to know, and you don't have to give this to them right now. You could just keep it with your power of attorney document and have them be able to access it if something happens to you. But they're going to need to know where to find your driver's license, where to find your social security card, and they're going to need to be able to know like everywhere that you bank, the bills that you pay, right? Does this sound familiar? Is this like the document I had you fill out before? They need to know all of that. And you need to make sure to let them know what you would want to happen if something happened to you. So if you get sick, you're incapacitated, and you own a business, who do you need to notify? But you gotta put it on them and inform them like of where all this stuff is and how you want things to go down if you can't act on your own behalf. So make sure you keep a copy of the document handy, or at least have them know how to access it if it's in the fireproof safe in your house, like I would recommend. They'll need instructions on where to find your personal identification, like your driver's license and social security number. Another big thing they need to know where to find is where to get your digital and online logins and passwords. In the document that I created for you, there's a spot to write down your digital online logins and passwords. I personally, at this point in time, use a password manager. So I have LastPass. This is not an endorsement for LastPass. You can go out and get Google's version of it. Is there like a OneVault, Lock something or other? There are all these password managers. They are so cheap. Like my password manager, I think is $4 for the year. And you just put in your master password, then you can store all your other passwords inside of there. I would recommend maybe using that if you have a lot of passwords, because I know I have like Bally Sports, NFL Ticket, YouTube TV, Netflix, Disney, Paramount, AMC. We have like 10 streaming services. We are not the people that went to streaming so it would be cheaper, because I swear I'm probably paying like $100 more than I was. But I say that to say, there's 10 passwords right there, so get a password manager. It just makes it a lot easier, in my humble opinion. If you only have a few passwords and logins, then just write them down, keep them up to date. Totally up to you. But those are the things that you need to make your attorney-in-fact privy to when it comes to their ability to act and act well on your behalf if you become incapacitated. All right, personal representatives and trustees, this is kind of lumped together. They're kind of one and the same, because a lot of you have trusts and you've named the same person who is your trustee as your personal representative, but not everybody on here has a trust. So your personal representative is going to be for everyone that has a will. So everyone here does have a will, but specifically for the people who have wills that will be probated. In the event that you don't get assets funded into your trust, or if you don't have a trust at all and you have a will, then to the extent that your estate includes a piece of real property, or all the assets in the estate exceed $75,000, then your will go through the probate court, and your personal representative is the person who is responsible for opening a probate. If you haven't been able to set up like a slush fund for legal fees or estate fees that they would get in really short order after you die, or if you haven't set up an insurance policy that would pay for your funeral, that can be signed over to the funeral home immediately so that you can have your services, and things like that, you need to be prepared that your personal representative, or they need to be prepared that they would be the person who pays out of pocket for all of this stuff until the estate is open and they can be reimbursed. What is all of this stuff? Well, that would be ongoing payment of your mortgage and your car note. That would be paying the attorney that opens the probate. That would be insurance premiums, anything that needs to continue to be paid. So they could be on the hook if it takes 3 months to get the probate open. Think about how much you spend month over month. And then add on attorney's fees and add on a funeral. They may need to have access to $50,000 to $60,000. Like, who knows? You just don't know. I know that we did a funeral recently and the funeral was no frills and it cost 15 grand. So, just depending upon what it is that they need, and 50 to 60 grand is probably like really a huge number, but they might need to have access to, let's say you live on a budget of $6,000 a month. Well, 3 months at $6,000, maybe a little less because you're not buying food now, you're not buying gas now, but your mortgage, your insurances, your premiums, your utilities so that your pipes don't freeze in the Minnesota winter. Couple thousand probably for attorney's fees and court costs, because there's like $600 in fees and costs to the court and the legal publishers and stuff. Your personal representative would need to be the person who pays that. Unless you've set up a slush fund or have some sort of money available that will be available to them immediately for payment of these things. If you don't have that, we can talk about some creative ways to structure that. And I would encourage you to make an appointment about that after this webinar. All right, but that's your personal representative. They are the person who would open the probate, and they are going to bring your will to the probate court for administration. They're going to start the proceeding, and then they're going to be the person who's responsible for distributing your assets through the estate. All right, trustees. This is very similar to the personal representative, except you have a trust and not a will at this point in time, and so you get to skip over the court process. And the trustee, though, is going to be the person who is going to take over with doing the administration and kind of a private administration process, which is why you probably have a trust that doesn't go through the courts. So instead of being done at the courthouse, it's typically done in a lawyer's house. The fees are much smaller as opposed to thousands and thousands of dollars for probate, court costs, publication fees, etc. The trustee will be the person who transfers or sells real property, just like a personal representative would. Distributes money and assets to whoever is specified in your will, files any and all applicable tax returns, and otherwise cares for the finances of the estate. If the trustee needs help, just like if the personal representative needed help, the trustee will be entitled to use funds from the estate or be reimbursed for any funds that they spend out to pay for legal fees, tax preparation costs, or other expenses that may arise during the ordinary administration of an estate. Remember, for either the personal representative or the trustee, they're in charge of winding down your entire life. So no matter what you've put into this planning up front, there are still going to be real time commitments to being a trustee or a personal representative. There may be some costs depending upon what route you choose. They're much less if you have a trustee as opposed to if you have to go through court. But it's your whole life. Something is bound to pop up. And if the estate is going to be administered over a number of years, the trustee is going to be responsible for filing tax returns annually, answering to beneficiaries, requesting fees. And so they're going to need to know that they have the obligation to keep a log, to keep track of all their expenses and their fees, and make sure that any money that's distributed to the beneficiaries is distributed in the correct shares. So that's the job of a trustee. They're literally just like becoming you with respect to distributing this money out to the people that it goes to. And the last secret agent is guardians for minor kids. This might be the toughest thing to teach to another person because it's dealing with your most precious asset, which for most of us is our children. So there are some things that you're going to want to compile and pull together for your agents to understand exactly what they need to know about your kids so they can continue raising them appropriately. So we encourage you to leave like a comprehensive list of instructions about your kids and your family members and your values so that your guardians could just pick up So where do your kids go to school? Who's their health insurance provider, their primary care doctor? Do they play sports? What are your values about discipline, potty training, therapy, allergies, all the things that we have various viewpoints on when we're thinking about raising our kids. Religious preferences, like has your child already been baptized or not, if that's a value for you. So many things. So as a part of the doc pack that comes with this webinar, we have a fillable PDF for you to write all this stuff out and compile it for your guardians to your minor children so that they have some wherewithal on what needs to happen or what you want to see happen when you're raising when they're raising your kids. Okay, moving right along. We're on to in sickness and in death, planning for incapacity, and final rest. Healthcare and final rest is where we marry a lot of these concepts together between like the living side and the death side of the estate planning process. We want to plan for both, of course. So first, let's talk about sickness. What happens if you get sick, which a lot of us will. So we've touched a little bit on healthcare directives a couple of times at this point, and we talked about getting your healthcare directive on file at your doctor's office and with all the healthcare systems that you're regularly treated at. We talked about getting the healthcare directive to your agents. And so here are a couple of other things for you to consider about your health care and what would happen if you get sick. So depending on where you were at mentally when we did your healthcare directive for you, it may be really a bare bones document with not a whole lot of instructions included in it. I know that mine still is. I haven't been treated enough for any sort of illness or sickness or been hospitalized too many times other than having 4 kids. So I don't really have a lot of opinions right now on certain treatments I would want or not want. Now, I know at such point in time as anything comes up, I do start to get more opinions like, oh, this happened to me. I would like it to happen differently in the future. If you are older though, or if you just had a lot of health treatments already in your life, you may have some really strong opinions about the type of care that you want. If you're already on certain medications, you may know that this medication works well for me, but the generic doesn't, or this version of it works great, but the other doesn't, or I like this, or I don't like this. If you have allergies, you might have really specific criteria for how you want it treated. You might want to go to a certain allergist or things like that. So if any of that pertains to you, you want to be making more concrete directions about how your body is treated in sickness. A lot of you should have some questions about healthcare that we gave you with your healthcare directive. If you don't, we do have another fillable PDF for you where you can fill in the answer to a lot of questions that are commonly detailed and asked in the healthcare directive. And you can fill those in, and you want to keep those with your healthcare directive so they could become a part of your overall healthcare plan. If you have any known mental health issues, which is a lot of people, mental health is much more common. Mental health diagnoses, I should say, are much more common now than they were even 10 years ago. People take their mental health very seriously and continue to be treated for things related to their mental health to make sure they're as healthy as they can be. If you regularly treat with a therapist or a psychiatrist, a counselor at a center or something like that, you might consider doing a psychiatric care directive. Now, this would be appropriate if you're treating for something like major depression, severe anxiety, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar depression, and those are like just to name a few of common things that we've seen people openly disclose to us in our offices. So we know that a lot of people are dealing with this. There is no stigma. There is no shame. There's only the ability to be well prepared, which is why we are offering this to you. This is a part of our doc pack as well. Some other things are people that suffer from addiction or are, working towards sobriety. you may consider this document as well, because some of the things that it goes into are like, where do you want to be treated? Who should be your primary care when we're talking about therapy, psychiatric treatment, certain drugs, all of those things. So this would be another reason to have this document. So we've included a psychiatric advance directive, which goes just beyond your plain old physical health and gets into questions that would allow you to consent to certain treatments, and like state your providers, detail like which organizations can share your records, who you'd be comfortable working with, what places you'd be comfortable treating at, etc. To the extent that you do that, it is very important that you would also like not just put your psychiatric care directive on file with your psychiatrist or at your therapist's office, but also with your primary care provider. Because what I have learned throughout the years from a lot of interactions in my life is that some of the, and I'm not a doctor, so by no means am I giving you medical advice, but what I've learned is that many of the drugs that are used to treat certain mental health things that arise for people will have like a direct impact on physical health or interact with a drug that they may be prescribed by a doctor for a physical ailment. And so we want your doctors to know, which they have their own forms and they ask, but like how closely, it doesn't help to dot, or doesn't hurt to dot your I's and cross your T's on this, but we just want to make sure that they have all of the same information that, your psychiatrist and your therapist would have. So just make sure that you have that, just like a physical healthcare directive, that the psychiatric advance directive, if you choose to complete one, is also included in your health file at your primary care, your oncologist, your hormone doctor, your allergist, and all the places. Okay. There are other forms that are available only at your doctor's office, and there are forms that can be doubled up. Just to name a few, only available at your doctor's office would be like a DNR, a do not resuscitate. That has to be done at your doctor's office. So if that's a value that you have or something that you want, and you've written that in your healthcare directive for DNR, you will have to also go to your doctor and make sure that you fill out the DNR form there that gets signed, I think, by your doctor as well, who said that they've explained to you the ramifications of the DNR and that you're making a statement that you're voluntarily and willingly and knowingly signing off on the DNR. And then another thing, you may say that you want to be an organ donor in your healthcare directive. You may also want to make that designation on your driver's license, because there's another spot for that. That's a good place to put it. To the extent that you may want to donate your body like to science. We've had clients do this. I've had family members do this, or put this at least in their plan. You can donate your body. And it's kind of cool if you don't really care about getting buried and you're cool getting cremated and you don't want your family to spend money on your final disposition of your person and your remains. You can fill out this form and you can donate your cadaver to the University of Minnesota, and they will come get your body, let the medical students do their thing on your body, cremate you, and send you back to your family and pay your family like $50. So that's an option too. And we've had people do it. So I will, if I haven't included it in the document package, which I'm not sure, then just reach out to me if you're interested in that, and I can direct you to where you can find the form to fill out to make that happen. And then I would, of course, also put that into your healthcare directive on that form that has the extra questions to answer about how you want to be treated. All right, now let's talk in this section just about death and your final resting place. And I encourage all of you, but especially clients who are more advanced in age than others on here, to consider leaving instructions and directions about laying you to rest. These could be things like, what kind of services do you want? What music should we be playing at them? Where should the funeral be? Who should be the singer or the reader? Should it be a party? Should it be a traditional funeral? Should it be at a bar? Should it be at a church? Put all of that into the memorial instructions that we have provided for you. I think every single person who's done a plan with us should have somewhere in their binder that lists out and states that you can do, or lists out and states memorial instructions for, how you want, what you want to happen. What do you want to happen? What do you want the celebration to be? Also, you will want to determine where not only will the funeral be, but like where do you want to be laid to rest? Again, as much as we can take off of the shoulders of your family and friends who are trying to grieve you by making these decisions in advance, then let's do that. The more we should. This is very useful and helpful to your family and friends, and it gets rid of arguments and it gets rid of uncertainty and guilt if you just make the decisions and we just follow what you said. So determine where you want to be laid to rest. Do you want to be cremated and have your ashes scattered to the extent that it's legal? It's not legal everywhere, so check on that. Cremated and put in an urn and be in somebody's house? Cremated and buried? Do you just want to be buried and then you want to pick the cemetery? Do you have a family plot? If you get buried at a certain cemetery, do you want to be like on the Lutheran side? Do you want to be on the Catholic side? Like, what do we want to do, right? So get that out there in writing. The other thing that I would encourage of you is to go out and get a funeral policy, an annuity, or something that can prepay the expenses to wherever you want them to go. So you can actually sign up and prepay for your cremation if you want to be cremated through the Cremation Society of Minnesota. You can also, there's a National Cremation Society. So if you may be traveling near the end of your life, if you were a snowbird, for example, you may choose to prepay through the National Cremation Society, so that if you die in Florida or in Arizona, where your other residence is, they can, their organization can pick your body up, cremate it, and like ship the remains back for you, or bring it to Minnesota and have it cremated here. And I actually learned this from a client, so super stoked about the information that you guys share with me as well. It's very helpful to the rest of us to learn that kind of stuff. But you could also do that and get something through the National Cremation Society. There are policies that you can purchase that can just be assigned directly to the funeral home. So I could get a policy for $15,000, and the language of the policy would say, this is to be assigned directly to the funeral home, and they'd have the right to cash it in once your death certificate came back. So you could like essentially prepay for this. The funeral home will go ahead and do your funeral, and then when the funds are available to be paid out, they'll just go directly to the funeral. If there's an overage, the funeral home will pay that money back to the family or to the estate or whatever. And if it's not enough, then the estate and the family will pay the remainder. But those are such a gift as well, because funerals are really, really expensive. Like, they're really high dollar. And so if you can pay for that stuff in advance, you definitely, if it's in your budget, definitely do and take advantage of that for the people that you love. Let's see if I missed anything in this section. I had a thought, and now it's escaping me. Oh, the other thought I had. This more goes back to in sickness, and it's not in the slides here, so I apologize because this thought just came to me and I should have thought about it before, because this applies to some of you. So some of you who are maybe over 50 but under 60, 65, you may want to consider looking at, when in sickness, whether or not you qualify for long-term care insurance. It is a big concern for many of us that at some point in time we'll become sick enough that we'll need to leave our home and go live in a nursing home type of facility, a tiered care space, senior living with services, or whatever. And it's expensive. The average rate in Minnesota for long-term care per month is something like $9,200 or something like that. It is not cheap. So to the extent that you qualify to get any sort of long-term care insurance that is not cost prohibitive to your budget, you may consider looking at that, as well as looking at disability insurance if you become, incapacitated and you're still young and you can't work. How does your income keep coming in? So those are just some thoughts for you of extra things to look at and extra things to do to supplement your plan So we have very clear, robust instructions for what we need to do if you get sick and what we need to do if you die. And you can like leave all this for your family and friends and take so much off of them by having this stuff done. All right. Last but not least, this is the final section. Thank you so much for sticking with me to this part of the content here at the end. And this is when you should update your plan. So congratulations, you've made it. We are coming close to the end of of some of the content here. And we're about to learn what you need to think about to consider updating your plan. Now, I do my best to try to make sure that we're giving you a plan that will last you for a long time. So if you've come to me, I've tried to think about right now in this moment, but also will this plan age with you, right? So my people who have young children, okay, if you die, tomorrow and little Johnny's 3 and little Susie's 5, what happens? Okay, great. They got to 18, then what happens? Okay, they graduated college, then what happens? Okay, they're 30, then what happens? So see how those plans should be able to age with the children and should work all the way through their lives. Same for our older people. But we try to make it something that can last you a long time, like as long as possible anyways, but none of us can control that life does keep moving. Things happen, people get sick, people die, you physically move somewhere else, and things change. And so, it's just really important to make sure that you continue to update and change your plan. I think I told you before the story about the trustee who didn't do anything. And then, because he didn't do anything to transfer the stuff to himself, the wife missed out on being the beneficiary or the heir to all of the assets that would have gone to the son. And then when he died, to the wife. That's too bad for the wife, like what the son didn't do as a trustee. But I also think about that. How long was the son married to the wife when the parents made the estate plan, and were they maybe not sure about her getting everything? Because she was named as like a partial beneficiary. So maybe like they weren't sure yet. But maybe when they had been married like 20 years or something, the mama and papa would have thought like, well, regardless of what happens, we would like wife to get everything. They could have changed the plan. They could have changed the plan to say, well, if the funds aren't paid out before son dies, but he's still married to wife when he dies, she gets everything. They just never changed the plan, because at the point in time that son died, or the parents died, that mama and papa died, the plan was like 20 years old. So they could have changed it, and they could have like avoided all of this. And I think about that sometimes too. So I don't want to let that be you. What I want to do is make sure you know that there are times where you want to be looking at reviewing and updating your plan, and here they are. At least every 3 to 5 years, you want to be reviewing your plan. Young people with young children and minor children, I would say every 3 years, because your life is changing so dramatically in a 3-year span, right? 30 to 33, big changes. 33 to 36, big changes. 36 to 39, big change. Like every 3 years, like you could be having another kid, buying a new house, getting a new job, moving like across the state. Like there's so many things that happen for people between like 25 and 45 or 25 and 50. Just the speed at which things change is crazy. Like I just think about myself, like 3 years ago I had a newborn and now I have a preschooler, right? And so things change a lot, and I've moved in like so many things. So young people every 3 years, older people I would say at least every 5. And then we can at least capture for you older people like an older, like you're so old, I'd say like 50 plus. You're not, you're still young. But either 50 plus, or if all of your children are adults, I would say you're all kind of in the same ballpark. Every 5 years, at a minimum, if nothing outwardly has changed immediately, you do want to come back in every 5 years and just make sure you still understand the plan, everything still makes sense. And then for you, your assets around that age bracket tend to be creeping up. And like a lot. Like you've accrued a lot of retirement benefits. You're finally getting the savings the way you want because you're not paying for hockey and gymnastics and dance and basketball tournaments and baseball and school lunch and all that stuff, right? And so your saving rate tends to be higher, your retirement assets tend to be much bigger. And so you want to come back too to also make sure like we're not looking at taxable estate kind of stuff, or that the tax laws haven't changed and we need to talk about them, or that if you've rolled retirements over that we made sure your beneficiary designations rolled with it. So you have your own concerns to talk about too. Another thing to consider is when you should think about updating your plan. If someone in your plan has died, a trustee, a fiduciary agent has died, we need to remove them. I know that you have people after them listed. Depending upon though who you're dealing with, it may be a hardship if you leave the deceased person on there, because they like the organization or the entity might require proof that they're deceased or incapacitated. So not just if they died, but like if they get ill or sick and they can't like continue on, then you want to remove them. Because you don't want to show up at Wells Fargo to do some banking transactions and add yourself as power of attorney on this account, and somebody's listed before you and they're deceased, and they're like, well, prove it to us that they're deceased. Bring us their death certificate and then fill out this form and do this and do that. Like, right? Like, let's just not do all that. So yeah, somebody dies or becomes seriously incapacitated. If you buy a new house, we want to make sure that that still fits into your plan. We still have a good outcome for that, especially because a lot of my clients have bought a new house but kept their old house as a rental. So we want to make sure we have things titled correctly to the trust. We want to make sure we're not doing any sort of like, triggering any tax events with like the homesteading and stuff like that, because now we have multiple properties and the trust owns them both. So come back in if you buy a new house, especially if you use the old house as a rental. That's a big one. If you get an inheritance come back, you may need to look at, you might now have a taxable estate or assets of a unique character, and they need to be worked into your plan. Reason to update your plan would be if you start a business. That's a big one. Another reason would be if you have a substantial increase in income, assets, or net worth. Oftentimes that's from an inheritance or because you started a business. So those things tend to go hand in hand. Think about updating your plan if your minor kids become adults. For some people, that means now they want their minor kids to be agents or trustees, because they're not minors anymore. They want their adult children, to become agents and trustees. So that would be a good reason to come and look at redoing your plan. Or another reason is if your adult children start having children of their own. I have lots of proud grandparents who are giving a class gift, like a gift to my grandchildren, share alike, because they love their grandkids and they just want to make sure that their grandkids have something just for them, so that the grandkids know that the grandparents were thinking of them and that they love them and all of those things. So those are some reasons that you really want to look at updating your plan. Okay? Cool. So we've